Welcome back to another episode of Is Fits Happy. I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And we're discussing Chapter 38, Paragon's Captain.
For our 200th episode.
Yeah, 200 episodes.
Woo.
Crazy. 200 plus a trailer. We should re-record that trailer at some point.
We should.
That was my first audio setup and
Our
a lot
first
of
time
ums
trying.
and oh, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I think it was the first thing we recorded, and we didn't even record one episode yet, so we didn't even know,
what we were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I haven't even listened to it in a really long time. I think it would be funny to go back and, but yeah, no, we should try it.
Either
Listen
way,
to it now.
we're at 200. It's been a long journey. And we're almost done with book 5 of 16. Woo.
Woohoo.
If that is anything to go by, we've got another 400, maybe 500 episodes to go. So
Let's go.
Let's see if we hit 700 before we finish this series.
Honestly, still more that could be talked about too.
True. All right. Well, as is in the title, we are joining back with Althea. And Althea says it's been 2 days since the serpent attack. Half had attempted to return to his duties, but after an hour in the sun, he had fainted and nearly fallen from the rigging. His attitude towards Althea was markedly more deferential. The rest of the crew seemed to be following his example. Half had not thanked her for saving his life, but she told herself she hadn't really expected that from him. It was, after all, part of her duties. She'd be content if he accepted that there were areas in which she was his better. She wondered idly which act had actually finally gained the men's respect, threatening to throw R2 overboard or standing up to the serpent. She still hurt all over, but if it had finally secured her berth as a second, then it had been worth it.
Yeah, so things are changing.
Yeah, at least for now. Things are looking up, and people are finally being deferential to her and not making the snide remarks, especially Half, who was kind of the leader of that before.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that it probably is a mixture of both things.
Yeah, definitely. Showing that she had the fight to fight off one of the crewmates who they probably knew about R2 and how creepy and weird he was.
I'm sure a guy like that doesn't quietly think his thoughts.
But then also shouting a correct command at somebody who is just trying to show off and fighting off a serpent when nobody else was.
Right.
Besides the captain. So
yeah. And so I guess, there's that aspect of she was correct in telling him not to do anything. And then she was able to do what he couldn't when he disobeyed. So
yeah. But it's only been 2 days.
Yes.
So things are still raw in terms of injuries. Brashen is still looking very, well, according to Althea's words, terrible. The blisters on his face had broken and the skin was peeling. It made him look lined and old and weary. Or perhaps he actually felt that way. And speaking of Brashen, he had summoned all of them, Althea, Amber, Lavoy, to his captain's cabins to discuss some things. His eyes were grave as he announced, "The crew seems to have finally settled into its duties. The ship is being run competently, though there is still room for everyone to sharpen up. Unfortunately, in the waters ahead, seamanship may not be as important as our ability to fight. We need to determine our expectations from the crew in the event of encountering pirates and serpents." So he pours some whiskey some brandy for everybody, and Cheers is like, "Hey, we're doing all right."
Yeah, go ahead and sit down.
We need to step it up a little bit. And so they talk about how they need to start training the crew in terms of battle, how they need to work together. They're already decent at brawling, and that's something that Brashen actually chose them for as well, that they were okay in a fight, but they need to work as a unit, as a crew, to fend off pirates if that were ever the case. They need to be able to fight together.
Right. And know how to do so to protect Paragon.
So they have to trust the judgment of the officers. Half learned the hard way that the ship's officers have reasons for their orders. I want to start training the men while that is still fresh in their minds. So he's saying to all of them that some of the men still treat those who were formerly slaves as beneath them, and he wants that changed. He wants all of them to be on equal footing and act as one unit.
Right. He is also now giving Lavoy the command to take over like they previously discussed when he was hired. So we learn that Lavoy's choosing, the choosing of Lavoy as first mate, also came with a stipulation that he would be training these men to fight.
Yes.
Which I think is really interesting and kind of glossed over. Althea doesn't seem to pay it any mind. Maybe she already knew about it.
When she was upset about that, she was still upset about her not getting chosen or even thought about as a mate. So I feel like it's trying to discredit anything that Lavoy could have brought to the table.
Fair.
And she has since acceded that he is a decent sailor, right?
Right.
And knows his way, and knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Just attitude problem.
Definitely. So yeah, I think this is a good I think that's a good thing to have in the back of our mind, that Lavoy in some capacity knows fighting well enough to train others in a way that Brashen feels like would be good to train the whole crew.
Or at least he has talked to Lavoy about the need to train them and has hired other people that are very good at that sort of thing.
Right.
And so Lavoy can still direct, but doesn't necessarily need to know it himself.
Fair, yeah. And am I mistaken, but does Lavoy try to do, like, take over the crew next book? Like, he tries to do a mutiny?
I don't remember specifically. I think he confronts Amber and Fitz skills him away, right? At one point.
Fitz?
Yeah, Fitz.
Oh.
There's talk about how he just kind of like recoils and turns around and walks away. And in the later series, Fitz talks to the fools like, "Oh, I had a dream that you were getting accosted or something." And yeah, we'll talk about it when it comes up, but it's next book.
So. Okay. Weird. No, I swear that I have like some weird thought that maybe Lavoy, through this training, gets people to be loyal to him to try to do a mutiny.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember.
But yeah, I don't fully remember. That's why I was asking, because the whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, is this why he does a mutiny, or was he going to do it anyway? So that's just a thought I had. Maybe somebody can let us know what we're forgetting.
Yeah. But Lavoy said, like, is nodding to this and like, yeah, we discussed it. And he's been letting the sailors kind of break into their own social groups so far, but is making the promise to Brashen, like, yeah, I'll make them one unit. I'll pair them up into their own teams. So some of those barriers are broken down and they see themselves more as a unit. There'll be a few broken heads before it's all settled. I know, but try not to let them disable each other in the process of getting acquainted. Lavoy gave a mirthless laugh. I was talking about what I might have to do to them, but I take your drift. I'll start drilling them with weapons, wooden stuff to start with. Let them know that the better fighters will get the better weapons. That may make them strive a bit harder. He shifted his attention to Amber. As long as we are speaking of weapons, I'll say this now. I want you to arm the ship. Can you devise a suitable weapon for Paragon to use to fend off serpents? A spear of some kind. And do you think he could be taught to employ it against another ship as well? I suppose I could, Amber sounded surprised. Then do it and create a mounting system for it so that he can have quick access to it on his own. I fear we'll have more trouble with those creatures the deeper we go into pirate waters. I want to be ready next time.
This is kind of the start of everything going downhill.
Not everything.
Not everything, but the relationship with Lavoy.
Yeah. Yeah, the relationship between Lavoy and Amber specifically.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe a little bit at Brashen, but mostly between Amber and Lavoy at this point.
Right. And I guess it's kind of fair because if you think about it, coming up, Amber isn't really talking to Brashen like he's the captain. She's talking to him like he's an equal. And especially for someone like Lavoy, I think that would be a negative, because
especially as he has kind of a high opinion of everything, and if he's being talked to like he's the first mate and talking back like it's the captain, he doesn't want to see other people who aren't in that hierarchy kind of passing him by.
Right. Agreed. So I think that's really important here
Mm-hmm.
is that there's this like sailor's culture, which Althea does a little bit comment on the fact that it's just really hard for Amber to get used to,
Right.
but that's how it has to be. That's just the way of a ship.
But Amber does offer her opinion back.
Right.
She says that I suggest, based on what I've heard from Althea, that the crew has to be made to understand that serpents won't react like most animals. The men should be told to ignore them and not provoke them until they've actually begun an attack. They won't flee, they'll attempt revenge. You know it's true, as she notices that Brashen frowning at her. And that being the case, are we wise to arm Paragon? Basically bringing in his judgment to question a little
Right.
bit here and saying that Paragon might attack a serpent if it was just curious or even well disposed towards us. I suggest that he should have a weapon, but not one that he can seize on his own impulse. The serpents affect him strangely. From what he says, I suspect it may be mutual. He claims that the serpent we killed has been following us for days, trying to talk to him. As much as we can, I suggest we avoid the serpents. When we do encounter them, I think we should avoid making enemies of them. The death of the last serpent has affected him strangely. He seems almost to mourn it. Very interesting information there, because Paragon at the end of the serpent battle said, I know you, or I knew you.
Right.
I remember. So obviously he kind of made that connection with the blood splattering on his deck a
Yes.
bit and is able to look back over the past few days and be like, oh, that serpent was trying to speak to me, and make all those sorts of connections.
Right. And I think Amber is right to bring up this concern. And this is why Brashen brought everybody together to hear their concerns.
Right.
So in some ways, it doesn't make sense that Lavoy gets angry at Brashen listening to her.
Because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But it just is like, I don't know, if you call in an expert and then don't listen to them, what was the point of calling them in to be part of the discussion? So I don't know.
Lavoy is kind of contemptuous of this, and he's like, what's the point of all of this if you're not going to give him the spear? Like, why make him a weapon to begin with? And also, serpents getting revenge, having enemies, talking. You sound as crazy as he does. Like, none of that's real.
Yeah, serpents
They're
are animals.
They don't think or plan. They don't have feelings. If we hurt them bad enough, kill enough of them, they'll avoid us. I'm with the captain, arm the ship. Only a fool would think differently. Amber was unruffled. I think differently. She gave Lavoy a cool and mirthless smile. It's not the first time I've been called a fool, and likely not the last. Which is hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Little funny thing.
Also, I think something that Fool as himself says to Fitz, maybe, but like this is not the first time that Beloved has said this about themselves. So
a little wordplay that Robin Hobb likes to throw in there.
Yes, I love it so much every time I see it. And also not the first time Amber has been called a fool.
Right.
I think it was Althea last time. So
maybe. Yeah. But this is where the wedge starts to come in between Amber and Lavoy here, because Lavoy's like, you know better than the captain. Come on. I'm with the captain on this. We should give ourselves every chance that we can have. And yes, he's coming from a place of ignorance, but in his mind, it's like, why would you go around the chain of command like this? Yeah. And then Amber just calmly like, I don't think he's right. Yeah. I think I'm right in this.
Right. And to be fair, Lavoy is saying like they're just dumb animals. Yeah. They don't have any thought process. Mm-hmm. And then I think this is what really solidifies their beef. Amber then goes on to say, I will tell you this. In my opinion, men deny animals have feelings and thoughts for one basic reason, so they won't feel guilty about what they do to them. But in your case, I think it's so you don't fear them quite as much.
Yeah, so a direct dig at Lavoy, pretty much, calling him a coward.
Yeah, which would, I think, especially with someone like Lavoy, would really get under his skin. Mm-hmm. I think most people don't enjoy being called a coward, to be fair. Yeah. But I think especially someone as machismo as
And this is Amber
Lavoy.
just being too far up her own butt with importance to
Yeah.
realize her place in the ship right now.
Yeah, I think this is one of Beloved's fatal flaws, is that they don't seem to understand that, like, there is certain times when you just need to keep quiet, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
exactly. Just shut up a little bit.
yeah,
Beloved.
just like
It's fine.
sometimes you don't have to say the thoughts out loud. They're funny and they are good jabs. However, doesn't really help the situation and mostly just stirs the pot.
You know, and we could literally go through all of hers, Amber's, or Beloved's lines and be like, oh, but this was probably pushing this person this one way.
Right.
No.
No.
The fool is also a person, you know,
Mm-hmm.
who makes impulsive decisions and gets angry and
Yes.
pokes at people they don't like.
Yeah,
And that's what Amber is doing.
Beloved's like, yeah, again, one of the worst traits of Beloved is that when they don't like somebody, they're mean to them and
Yeah.
they don't care. They don't care if it makes the whole situation more uncomfortable or like worse environment for everybody else. They'll poke the bear. They don't care.
And Amber's not been having a great time on board because no private time, right?
Right. So definitely already,
Taking out a little bit here.
yeah, this is kind of very reminiscent of Starling in a way,
Mm-hmm.
although I feel like the hatred towards Lavoy is a little more warranted. I don't know, maybe arguably, but
But yeah, Lavoy is shaking his head in disgust, saying, I'm not a coward, and I'm not likely to feel bad about anything I do to a serpent, unless I'm stupid enough to be his supper. And he shifts his attention to Brashen once more. Sir, if you're satisfied, I'd like to get back to the crew. And Brashen gives him a nod and just reiterates his commands, saying, begin weapons drill, but emphasize quick obedience as much as skill right now. Make sure they understand they aren't to act until they're told to, especially if the enemy is a serpent. Make the best use of the men we have. 2 of the former slaves have substantial weapons experience. Put them in charge of some of the drills. And Jack. She's quick and knows her way around a blade. I want any barriers that might keep them from fighting as a unit broken down. He frowns for a moment. Amber will create a weapon for the ship, and she will instruct him in it. He met the carpenter's eyes. When he is armed, will be at her discretion unless I countermand it. I believe her observations regarding serpents and their effect on the ship have merit. Our tactic regarding serpents will be the first to avoid and ignore. We fight them only if we're attacked. He paused to let his words sink in on Lavoy. His voice was firm as he added, I think I've covered all I had for you. You can go. A terrible look fleeted over Lavoy's face. Amber met it squarely. Brashen had done little save rephrase Amber's suggestions as an order. Another man might have accepted that, but Lavoy clearly resented it. Althea watched him thinly mask his resentment as he bowed curtly to Brashen and headed for the door. And then pauses Amber and Althea as they start to get up and says, I have more to speak to you. And Lavoy is once again angry, and he's like, should I know about these things? You're doing things behind the first mate's back now? And Brashen's like, no, if they were, I would have told you to stay. So
you
there's
have
that,
your tasks, go to them.
Yeah, so there's that wedge between Amber and Lavoy there, just on a personal level. And then Brashen gives the orders that he's siding with Amber, which drives the wedge further in between Amber and Lavoy. But then including Althea and Amber in further counsel that he's not made aware of makes that anger go towards Brashen as well.
Yeah, that was the bad decision. However, I will say Lavoy is the one who wanted to leave and who asked to be excused.
Right.
Therefore, I feel like it's a little unfair to be mad that he's not privy to this information. Like, he's the one who said he wanted to leave.
To be fair, Brashen's like, yeah, you can go. And if he wanted to say anything or like have extra orders that he wanted to sit in on, he'd be like, oh, before you go, I have a couple other things to talk about.
True. I don't know. It just feels...
I think to Lavoy, it feels like he's trying to hide things from Lavoy.
Okay. Okay, sure.
Which shouldn't happen to a first mate.
Right. No, I think, yeah, there's definitely not... Not not some great choices made by Brashen. Although I don't necessarily know what a better choice would be, so maybe that's like
I
the
think they're
best
the
of the
best.
option. Yeah. Although I feel like maybe a better choice would be to let Amber and Althea go and then call them back later or
Maybe.
something. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, no worries, Lavoy. We're just gonna have a secret meeting without you. So I don't know. I also wanted to point out that I think Lavoy is being a little bit unfair to be upset about the new orders because I think Brashen wasn't really saying they're going to start attacking pirates and serpents as they go, right?
Mhm.
He was just saying we need to be prepared for battle. So that wasn't necessarily like,
Yeah, but that's not what Lavoy's upset at either, of like not attacking serpents. It's they're fighting over whether Paragon can have his spear next to him.
right. No, that's fair, but I feel like he also is upset that Amber's version of like we should avoid the serpents unless they attack us. He's like, no, we should attack them because the more we attack them, the more they'll learn not to
Mhm.
bother us. I think that directly makes me feel like that's what he's most upset about. It's like we should be attacking these beasts. And I don't think that was originally Captain's orders anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not just
I didn't
Amber's
really get
orders.
that from him, but yeah, okay. I
Yeah.
can see that side.
So I guess that's where I was like, well, I don't know. It's not just Amber's thoughts on the matter. I think Brashen also feels that way, especially knowing that he didn't want to have to attack the serpent that attacked them.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I personally think it's more about his lack of control in the situation because Brashen literally says Amber is the one who directs when Paragon gets his spear, only to be countermanded by me, once again skipping him. So that's where I feel like Lavoy is getting his anger from, of just like, okay, once again, you're leaving me out of things.
Okay. Sure.
So that was just my thought on it.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
So Brashen dismisses Lavoy, and Althea takes a silent breath. She thought Lavoy would challenge Brashen right then. The stare that held between the two men was edged. Lavoy moved his mouth as if he would speak, then curtly nodded instead. He turned. He did not slam the door as he left, but shut it smartly. Was that wise? Amber dared to ask in the silence that followed. Brashen gave her a cold captain's look. Not wise, perhaps, but necessary. He sighed as he leaned back in his chair, poured himself another jot of brandy. Instructively, he addressed Amber. He's the mate. I can't allow him to think he is my voice, nor that no opinion save his and mine count. I asked you here for your opinion. For him to disparage that is not acceptable. He allowed himself a small, tight smile. But keep in mind that for me to do that would be entirely within my authority. So that's where I'm getting the Lavoy's anger from, right? Because
Right.
he has an attitude problem. Otherwise, he would have been a first mate long ago. That's what
Mm-hmm.
Brashen thinks, because he is a very competent sailor. But because he is first mate, he thinks he is entitled to only him and the captain's opinion mattering, when it's
Right.
actually the captain says whose opinion matters.
Right.
You're just the first one to act on the commands.
Yeah. You get a couple more perks of
Right, exactly.
being up the ladder. Yeah. It's That's fair. I don't know. I think it's an interesting like culture, the sailing culture that is in
Yeah.
this book and potentially in real life. I don't know. I'm not a sailor, but I definitely hate Brashen's way of being like, well, I'm the captain and what I say goes all the time, even though I understand
Like it has to be like that.
kind of, but does it? Like it's just them in there. Does there have to be a distinct line even now, even right this second? And I think I feel for Amber in this moment when Althea mentions that Amber kind of bristles at him saying, it's within my authority to just not heed your advice.
Mhm.
And I feel that like it would be really hard. This is somebody that you regard as a friend, I assume, to then like turn around and say, oh, but I'm the authority here, I'm in charge, and you have to listen to me after all this time of being equals, if not Amber being in charge. It's kind of a weird flip, and it would be really hard to get used to.
Sure. But, having that voice on a dangerous voyage is very important. So I think it is necessary for Brashen to establish that line, because when he says that I need people to act in a unified manner and obey, I believe him, and I believe that indicates Amber and Althea as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, he needs them to be able to respond to orders and have that line and think of him as the authority and have the authority to do that, not I'm telling you to do this, and then Amber's like, but my opinion is I shouldn't do this.
Fair, yeah. Why do you think Amber has such a hard time ceding authority? Like, what do you think it is that makes it so that she can't?
I think it's a couple things. Off the top of my head, I haven't thought about it too much, but off the top of my head, one is the freedom that Amber has always been afforded, or Beloved has always been afforded.
Mhm.
And I don't mean always, but
Right.
always from the time of the Six Duchies till now.
Okay.
Being able to work on the purpose, and right, that's what Amber is doing here on a
Mhm.
mission. She thinks that her mission is the most important when she's just a passenger to these people,
Right.
basically. And she can't explain that purpose really to them.
Right.
And then the other things come from the childhood of Beloved, being forced to basically be a prisoner at Claris,
Mhm.
escaping, and then going to the satrap of Jamalia and being kind of welcomed there, and then being you can go on a ship, but being abused on that ship
Right.
on the way over to the Six Duchies. It's just being confined, being in the power of somebody else, being beholden to somebody else's whims. And yes, Beloved was beholden to Shrewd's whims, but that was by a mutual bond of respect, and like, you could have done things to me, but you gave me a safe place.
Okay.
And in
Sure.
return, I really value the place that you gave me, and I'll help you with things, right? So
Okay.
having tasted both sides is really kind of like, I don't like being on the receiving end of people directing what I do.
Okay, yeah, that's a good a good insight. I like that.
Because even the things that she did for Shrewd, seeing into the future, seeing specific things,
Yeah.
hated doing that. Hated doing that as a direction, but would
Right.
because it was Shrewd.
Right.
It was her king.
Right.
Technically at the time, his king, the fool's king.
Right.
And now doesn't quite have that same connection with Brashen. Yes, friends, like you said, and Brashen is doing his best to be like, this is for safety reasons and for like,
Yeah.
needs to be what is happening on board when we're in the middle of sea. And especially, I think Brashen needs to keep that line because even in private, because Althea is there and they've established that line of like, we're not going to go there. We
Yeah.
want something to happen. We both know that, but it's for the best that I'm the captain.
Right.
So I think he's trying to cling hard to that. And Amber's never been in that position before.
That's fair. I guess, yeah, I was also thinking as you were talking about how Beloved was kind of forced to do things that they didn't agree with that ultimately were for the worst possible thing whenever they were held in Claris. I guess I don't know that they were prisoner there necessarily, but
They were kept forced. They weren't a prisoner in the sense of a cell, but they were
Right.
a prisoner where they were confined and like given some books to read and taught and stuff, but kind of
dismissed
as like an oddity.
Yeah.
Because they weren't the real prophet.
Right. And I think that probably also is part of the character of Beloved and Amber, that there's a sense of like, don't dismiss me.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I actually am a really important person in the world. Don't dismiss me.
The arrogance.
Yeah. Fair enough, I guess. They literally can see the future, so.
But Althea is appraising this situation, and immediately something clicks in her mind and is like, he has it. He has that X factor. The whatever quality makes you a captain, Brashen has that. He's able to make these decisions, and yes, it's aging him. It looks like, it's a difficult decision.
She just keeps going on and on about how old this man looks, and he's like, what, like 28?
There were new lines in his brow and at the corners of his eyes, but he had also drawn that cold, hard line that separated the commander from his crew. She wondered if he were lonely. Then she knew it did not matter. He was what he had to be. She felt a pang of loss at the line that must separate him from her as well, but the surge of pride she felt in him overwhelmed any selfish regrets. This was what her father had seen in him. Brashen had justified all of Ephraim Vestrit's belief. So then he continues on with his orders and stuff. But this is the thing, and it kind of clicks in Althea like, okay, he's a good captain.
She finally gets it.
Just funny.
I'm wondering if her feelings partially are what make her feel this way, like towards Brashen.
Maybe, but some of her feelings at the beginning prevented her from seeing him that way, right? They thought he would be like bad at being a captain, or she would be better. And she still had the feelings for him.
Yeah, but had she accepted them at that point? Because I feel like now she's acknowledged that she has feelings for him and they're there. And
yeah, maybe it accelerated that. Like, I can accept him where he is because I love him.
Yeah. But I mean, I won't say that she's necessarily wrong. I don't think this is like,
no,
rose-colored glasses or whatever.
So the task for Althea is to copy out some of the charts that he made from memory on his time aboard Spring Eve. He says first that they're going to head to Divvy Town, but he wants these made just in case his knowledge is gone. So again, another something that pops into Althea's head that she hadn't thought about is what happens if he dies? Right. What happens if he's no longer there to continue on? This mission still needs to happen. So here are the contingencies.
Right. And he does mention that after she makes these into better looking maps, he wants to bring in Lavoy. He can't read, but he can memorize things really easily. So
yeah, his memory is sharp.
Yeah, so that's part of the contingency plan, is that at least Lavoy will know where to go and how to sail in this area, which I don't know. If Brashen died, if he did die, I don't know that I would trust that Lavoy would continue on the mission, I guess.
Right.
Like, it's kind of high hopes.
Then he directs to Amber. Paragon was holding you. I heard your voices. You were over the side last night. I was. Doing what? The carpenter looked extremely uncomfortable. Experimenting. Brashen sighed. I won't tolerate that from Lavoy. What makes you think you can adopt that attitude? More gently, he added, if it happens on the ship and I think it's my business, I'll know about it. So tell me. Amber looked down at her gloved hands. We all discussed this before we left Bingtown. Paragon knows of the work I did on Ophelia. He supposes that if I could restore her hands, I could give him eyes again. I have my doubts. Brashen's tone was dangerous. As I do. As you were well aware. I told you before we sailed, this is no time for risky experiments in wizard wood carving. A failure that disappointed him could endanger us all. Anger flickered over Amber's face. I know what you're thinking, but it isn't something that is between the two of you. It involves all of us. She took a breath. I haven't touched his eyes, sir, nor told him that I would. Then what were you doing? Erasing the scar from his chest, the seven-pointed star. Has he told you what the star means? Amber shook her head. I don't know. I only know that whatever memories it holds for him are extremely unpleasant. It was a sort of compromise. That encounter with the serpent disturbed him deeply. He has thought of little else since then. I sense that he is reconsidering all he is. He's like a boy in adolescence. He has decided that nothing is the way he believed it to be and is reconstructing his whole vision of the world. She took a deep breath as if to say something important. She seemed to reconsider it and said instead, It's a very intense time for him. It is not necessarily bad what he's doing, but it's deeply introspective. For Paragon, that means sifting through some very bad memories. I sought to distract him. We know that the seven-pointed star is Ygritte's symbol,
Yes.
that it was carved into him or burned into him.
Branded, I think.
Branded into his chest.
By Kenneth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was forced to do that.
Yes. Would Brashen know that?
No.
Okay.
No, he doesn't know anything about Kenneth's connection to the star. He doesn't know anything about Ygritte, really, because it was before his time.
Yeah, I didn't think he'd know about Kenneth, but I was just wondering about Ygritte. But yeah, I guess it is.
Kenneth is early 40s, like, I don't know, 41 to 44, somewhere in there. And Ygritte died when Kenneth was 15 at the most.
Right.
So that's way before Brashen's time.
That's fair. But you'd think there would be tales of Ygritte.
Sure, maybe, yeah. But doesn't mean that he bandied his symbol about.
I guess. I guess it also feels odd that Bingtown, being such a trading port city, would also, whenever Paragon came back, would also not recognize the symbol, because that would have been around the time when Ygritte had just died, so he still would have been relevant.
True.
So you think that somebody would notice?
Do you think that Ygritte targeted Bingtown ships? I don't. I think he targeted Jamelia ships because that's where he got his big fortune from, right?
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
Because I think that he knows that other live ships were the only one who had a chance of catching him.
Right.
And he wouldn't have wanted to reveal his secrets.
Touche. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Also, quick question for you. I have a misspell or a misprint. It says Amber shook his head. Do you also have that?
Yeah, I do.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've talked about this. I think we have the same.
Yeah, the same version.
Prints,
Yours is just digital.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just checking. Yeah, so let us know if you if you have the misprint.
Well, Brashen is saying you should have asked me first, and you should not be alone. You should have somebody watching you. Amber's like, well, Paragon's watching me. Brashen says, nevertheless, when you are over the side, I want to be aware of it. How is the work progressing? Amber kept her temper. Slowly. The wood is very hard. I don't want to just plane it off and leave a different sort of scar. I'm more obscuring than erasing it. I see. Do you think it's possible you could restore his eyes? And the same old conversation happens. Basically, Amber would have to reshape the entire face and doesn't even know if the eyes would see anything because they don't know anything about the magic.
Right.
I see, Brashen considered. Carry on with the scar, and I want you to take the same precautions I'd expect of any other hand. This includes having a partner of some kind when you are over the side, in addition to Paragon. That's all then. You can go. Althea suspected it was not easy for Amber to accede to Brashen's authority. She rose to his command, not resentfully as Lavoy had, but stiffly, as if it offended her sense of self. Althea rose to follow her out, but Brashen's voice stopped her at the door. A last word with you, Althea.
I feel like it's kind of silly that Amber doesn't recognize the danger. I get that Amber has this whole thing of, Paragon would never hurt me, and, I trust, but...
Again, I think it's Beloved's arrogance.
Yeah.
And just, sense of importance that, no, this is work I need to do, and doesn't even take into the account that the future is always changing, and at any point Paragon could just kill her, and then the future doesn't happen the way that she wants it to.
Yeah, I think also it's frustrating because Brashen does bring up the good point of it doesn't just affect you two. If you do this and it goes badly, we all die.
Yeah.
And I, as a reader, understand that she doesn't see the future where they sink or whatever. And so that's why she doesn't feel uncomfortable about it, that uncomfortable. But I don't know. It's still annoying that Amber doesn't really take that into consideration.
Right.
I don't know. Because that is a fair and valid concern. When it was on the beach, doesn't affect everybody. When you're literally on the open waters, and that is the thing that you all are aboard and trusting to not drown you, maybe take a chill pill.
Oh, yeah. And Amber's unending need to keep secrets as well. So Brashen talks to Althea about keeping an eye on Amber because Brashen knows that he's put her in a bad spot with Lavoy. Watch over her. No, that's not what I mean. She's as dangerous to him as he is to her. He just doesn't know that yet. Watch the situation. If it looks like they will clash, warn me. Lavoy is bound to have resentments, but I won't prevent him to take them too far. So, good idea. He knows how dangerous Amber can also be.
Yeah, true.
And then he says one other thing. You all right? Your hands, I mean? I think so. Took some time before he speaks again. I want you to know. His voice went quiet. I wanted to kill R2. I still do. You know that. She smiled crookedly. So did I. I tried. But it was better as it came out. I beat him. He knows it. The crew knows it. If you had jumped in, I'd still be trying to prove myself to them. But it would be worse now. She suddenly knew what he had to hear from her. You did the right thing, Captain Trell. His real smile broke through briefly. I did, didn't I? There was real satisfaction in his voice. The crew respects your command. So do I. She says that she crosses her arms tightly against her side to prevent her from going to him.
Yep.
He sat a bit straighter. He didn't thank her. It wouldn't have been appropriate. She walked quietly from the room. She didn't look back as she quietly closed the door between them. As she closes the door, Brashen shuts his eyes. He'd made the right decision, and they had made the right decision. They both knew it. They had agreed that it was better this way. Better. He wondered when it was going to get easier. Then he wondered if it would ever get easier.
And that's all we hear from Brashen.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the line between the two of them, of course. But yeah, Brashen just wanted to have some reassurance that he's doing an okay job.
Yeah, he definitely needs the words of affirmation.
Yeah, I mean, considering his past and everything that he feels he's screwed up on.
Right.
He's always a failure.
And I think it means more coming from Althea than anybody else.
Yeah.
Not just because she didn't like him and resents him for becoming captain over herself, but I think because of her connection to her father.
Yeah.
And I think Brashen trusts that Althea
will recognize.
Yeah, would know what her father would say, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure in some ways it feels like he's getting Ephron's approval too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's a cute little scene between them. I feel like this whole portion in Althea's point of view is I wish there was more of her input, because I feel like it's so heavy on dialogue that we don't really get a ton of Althea's feelings until this end part where she's like, oh, I love Brashen so much. I gotta stop myself from going to him. There's a clear line here. He's captain. I'm second mate. So I don't know. I wish there was more of her opinions on.
It's not a romance story, though.
That's true. That's true.
We just get little hints of it. We switch over to Paragon for the last point of view of this chapter, though.
Yes, and he's giving his secret.
Mm-hmm. There's two of us. She weighed so little. She was like a doll stuffed with millet. So there is, Amber agreed. You and I. She's working on his chest once again.
And he's holding her in his hand.
Mm-hmm. It reminded him of a cat's tongue. No, he corrected himself. It would have reminded Kerr Ludluck of a cat's tongue. That long-dead boy had liked cats and kittens. Paragon had never had one. Remarking on the weird texture of whatever tools she's using on him.
Right. I also think it's really interesting that he is purposely thinking about where each memory has come from.
Yes.
I wonder if before he was not able to do that, and with the serpent's blood / poisons, there's a little bit more ability to parcel through what belongs to who, or if it was even just before he was refusing to look deeper.
That's what I think it is. I think it brought forward the awareness of it. He was always able to do it, but it made him self-aware that he could do that. And there was more than just those things making up his being. So there's now a reason to separate those out from who he was.
Yeah.
Because he says, not you and I, me and me. There's two of us. Sometimes I feel that way myself, Amber replied easily. Sometimes when she was working, he felt like she went somewhere else. Who is your other me? He demanded. Oh, well, a friend I had. We used to talk a lot. Sometimes I hear myself still talking to him, and I know how he would answer. I'm not like that. There has always been two of me.
So that friend Fitz, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you think that Fitz is actually talking back through the skill and they just don't know it?
I don't think so, no. I think it's literally just her or him in her mind.
Okay. Interesting.
She switches to sandpaper and continues on as if nothing had interrupted that conversation. If there are two of you, I like both. Keep still now. He smiled to her words because they were true, even if she didn't know it. Amber, have you always known who you were? Not always, but I always suspected. And then she adds in a normal voice because that was a little bit more guarded. That's a very odd question to ask. You are a very odd person, he teased and grinned. You are one spooky ship, she said quietly. So it kind of gets to the center of Beloved a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Have you always known who you were or who you are?
And if I'm being honest, I feel like Beloved doesn't fully know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of self-doubt and a lot of questioning.
Yeah.
And they just keep having to remind themselves, like, I am the white prophet, but I don't know that that's
doesn't always
fully
help.
Yeah, I don't know that that's fully sincere. Like,
right.
They definitely are, and they definitely believe that, but I think part of them doesn't. Like imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Paragon admits, I haven't always known who I was, but now I do, and that makes it all easier. I have no idea what you mean by that, but I'm happy for you. She was distracted again about oils, trying to, again, hide the scar of the seven-pointed star.
Right. She mentions that the oils that she's using work to swell wood to hide scratches in normal wood, but isn't really sure how it will react in wizard wood and wants his permission to try. And he says, why not?
Mm-hmm. And then she asks Althea if she's ever had any experience with oil on wizard wood, and Althea responds, because Althea is the watcher that Brashen ordered at this point, that she's used it on other things but never on the painted figurehead. And Amber says he's not really painted, the color is just there all through the wood. Then why is the chopped part of his face gray? I don't know. Paragon, do you know why? Because it is. It was odd. When he tried to tell them something about himself, they didn't listen. Then they pried into things that were not their business. He tried again. Althea, there are two of me. Go ahead and use the oil. It can't hurt. It will either sink in and swell the wood, or it will stay on top and we can wipe it off. What if it stains? It shouldn't. Just try a little bit and see. I'm not just what the Ludluck's made of me, he burst out suddenly. There is a me I was before, just as much a part of me. I don't have to be whom they made me. I can be who I was before. Shocked silence greeted his words. Amber was still in his hands. It shocked him when she reached out and set her gloved hands on either side of his face. Paragon, she said quietly, perhaps the greatest thing one can discover is that you can decide who you are. You don't have to be whom the Ludlucks made you. You don't even have to be who you were before that. You can choose. We are all creatures of our own devising. Her hands traveled over the high bones of his cheeks. When her hands came to where his beard began, she tugged it playfully on either side. It could not have been a stronger reminder of the human elements in his makeup. Yet it was as she had just said. I don't have to be what you want me to be either, he reminded them both. So, yeah, they do ignore him there, and he's kind of angry at that. They just kind of continue to talk about the oils. And
right.
he says, I'm trying to tell them about myself, but they ignore me, and then they ask about things that they shouldn't or don't have a right to know.
Yeah, I find it really interesting, especially because you would think Amber would be all over this, trying to piece
Yeah.
together what it means. And maybe she is just really distracted, trying to make sure she doesn't damage Paragon, and this was just bad timing.
This is a hobby that she truly, truly enjoys.
True. So I don't know, but you'd think it would snap her out of it to hear him talking about himself and the before.
Yeah,
And
the before really should
Yeah.
get her curious. But Amber does say the philosophy, right,
Yeah.
of the white prophets here. You can choose. We are all creatures of our own devising. That's the greatest decision that you can realize.
I think this is really interesting to me because it really is reminiscent to me of how Vivacia and Wintro interact.
Yeah.
And this is a similar thing that has happened with both of them, where Vivacia is being introspective, is thinking about who she is in the grand scheme of things, and Wintro isn't really paying attention and is kind of like, yeah, you can't, like, let me go from the philosophy angle of
treating them like rain.
Yeah.
Like Janie cheats rain.
Yeah.
Patting him on the head.
Yeah, very good. And it would be really frustrating. Like, you're trying to have a real conversation and they just don't get it, which is not necessarily their fault. Like,
right, yeah.
They don't understand. And that's because of how secretive everything is. But I do feel really bad for both Vivacia and Paragon, that when they want that deeper connection, they want somebody to understand them, the people around them can't, just by virtue of the fact that they're just human and they just can't get it.
Yeah, just human. He says, I don't have to be what you want me to be either, he reminded them both. His hands closed around Amber. Such a trifling toy she was, a creature made mostly of water, enclosed in a bag of thin skin. If humans ever grasped how completely fragile they were, they would not be so cocky. With one hand, he casually snapped her safety line. I want to be alone now, he told her. I have something I want to think about. He lifted her over his head, and he felt her stiffen in his hands. Her sudden realization that he could dash her down into the water brought a smile to his lips. She knew now what he had finally discovered. I have choices to consider, he told her. He swung her over his head and held her steady until she grasped the railing. When he knew she was secure, he let go of her. Althea was there, grabbing hold of her and pulling her onto the deck. He heard Althea's low question. Are you all right? I'm fine, Amber said softly, just fine. And I think Paragon is going to be just fine also. Which is that can be a scary thing, and it could have been a very scary thing maybe a couple months ago, but this measured reaction of, yeah, he did remind them that he's scary, and he snapped her safety line and closed his hands around her a bit. Yeah, it could remind Amber about it, but it's a far sight from the I will kill you and all your family kind of threats and violence that he was doing.
And there's no tantrum going on.
Yeah, it's much more measured and coherent.
Yeah. So probably less scary than he thinks.
Or maybe more scary.
True.
No, there's an intelligence behind it.
Yes, true. Very true. No, I think I love Paragon's growth, and I love, I don't know, just everything about him. He's maybe my favorite character.
Very interesting character, at least. And that's where that chapter ends. There's only 2 more left.
Ooh.
I know. And they get shorter and shorter.
I know.
So thank you for tuning into this one. If you have thoughts on how Paragon is progressing or the dynamics on board the ship with Lavoy and Brashen, please let us know. Email us at isfitshappy@gmail.com. We read all of those emails and we love responding to them and listening to them on this podcast here. So you can also comment on any of our social medias or send us a message through, though. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Threads, and on YouTube as well. So please leave comments on any of those. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, can't wait to see what you have to say. So now we're going to talk about the stuff that you brought to us.
Yeah, we can start with an email from Jonas, actually.
It's a fun one.
Yeah, just talking about our fan casting that we had a couple episodes ago now. And Jonas is bringing up Always Sunny, probably because Danny DeVito was brought up as well. But
Yes.
Jonas has just some, fan castings for Always Sunny characters in here. Says Danny DeVito, we got him spot on with Sincure Falden. Beautiful role for him. But also says that if he were taller, I'd love to see him play Burek, which is weird to me. I don't know. I don't see him as Burek at all. But
I think it'd be a fun role.
I want to see him as Chade. I want to see him, Danny DeVito as Chade as Lady Time.
Yes. Oh, so good. That'd be so good.
It says Glenn Howerton, who plays Dennis on the show, he's Kenneth for me. So, yeah, I can actually see that. He's sociopathic on the show. Kind of fits into that manipulator kind of role. Very full of himself, arrogant, Charlie Day is versatile, so maybe Verity. Jonas says this is far out there, but I can see it. I guess, find a way. I think he's just too goofy.
Charlie Day's the one with the meme of the papers in the background where he's connected the dots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that as Verity.
Okay.
That's very Verity to
me. He likes maps.
Yeah. He's connected everything.
I don't know how to say Rob's last name. Rob McElhenney, who plays Mac, would be Black Rolf, which I really like that casting, actually. That's maybe just physically, it kind of fits him a bit.
Yeah,
maybe
fair.
Fat Mac when he was bulking. And then Caitlin Olsen, who plays Dee, the bird from the final trilogy, Motley. The joke is on Always Sunny that she's a bird, basically. Seriously, though, she's an amazing actress, but her comedic timing is so good that I want to put her in a funny role, which is hard in a Robin Hobb novel. Totally agree there. So maybe Kestrel for Dee, which would be interesting. Have someone play just a comedic actress just playing Kestrel.
I feel like that
Kettle.
fits. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just throwing out quirky, rude lines.
Yeah. I could also see Starling maybe as a funny role.
Yeah, if this was completely turned into a comedy, it would be hilarious to put some of these people in very unlikely roles.
Yeah,
so
true.
Yeah.
But anyway, so thank you, Jonas, for that casting. It was very fun to read.
Mm-hmm.
We also got an email from Jess, and this one is a little bit more serious. And it is about thoughts on Tintaglia and being lost in the memories. So
put a little bit of layer of tinfoil on our heads here. And
yes, so I'm obsessed with this idea. So thank you, Jess. But basically, Jess says, in regards to Rain getting lost in the memories, potentially becoming dangerous, and his ramblings while drunk, that sounded Janie and Bendir like he wants to kill himself and possibly take Malta with him. I wonder if Tintaglia has tried this strategy with other Rain Wilders in the past, e.g., Rain's dad. So the idea is that perhaps those who killed themselves or have been poisoned because they were becoming dangerous were suffering the same way Rain is. There's been a history of people succumbing to the memories, and it wouldn't be that outside of the realm of possibility that Tintaglia would reach out to other people and try to get them to help her cause.
Yeah. So Jess thinks there might be a history of Tintaglia kind of having these people pushed along the way to try to free her, but eventually they just end up succumbing to the city and the memories themselves.
And becoming poisoned by their Rainwild folk. So
yeah.
I think it's such a good idea. It also is kind of backed up by the previous chapter that we just read, because Tintaglia makes the comment that Malta was more open to the city than any other person that's walked through.
True.
Which makes it seem as though she can tell when people are open to the skill.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think that's a really cool idea that maybe it's not necessarily getting lost in the memories. It's Tintaglia taking over. And there could be some crossover of they forget or get drawn into the memories. And Jess also says I'm sure there's also folk who have gotten lost in the memories in other ways, like Rapskull did, and some who end up vegetative and get poisoned by rainwilders as a result. But these people aren't dangerous. Maybe the dangerous ones were being hounded by Tintaglia. Just
Yeah.
a thought.
Yeah. And that definitely could be true. So it kind of rules out Rain's dad as one of those directed by Tintaglia if this theory is 100% correct, because Rain's dad was just in a room stacking blocks, right?
Well, he could have gotten lost. And his mom does say that his dad was dangerous, right? At some point?
I don't know
like
if
Janie
that's,
said.
I don't know if those two thoughts are connected ever.
Okay.
I think they're talked in the same kind of thought pattern because they relate to the same
Right.
kinds of things, but I don't know if they're ever linked to his dad was dangerous and therefore poisoned.
Okay.
I think it was people who get lost in the memories sometimes become dangerous and we poison them to kill them. And then his father had to be poisoned. I don't think they're ever like explicitly linked.
That's fair. I wonder too, though, this is a little bit of a tangent offshoot, but I wonder if Rain's dad got lost because he didn't know to have more of a sense of himself.
Yeah, maybe.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Malta has had experience getting lost in the Skill River and being put back together and knows
by
the
Amber, yeah.
Yeah, and knows the kind of thought of a name connects you. Like you need to know who you are.
Right.
And so even though it was just one time that happened, I think that's still one more time of actual experience than anybody else would have.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you don't have that touchstone of I am Malta or I am Rain's dad or whatever, then maybe when you dive into the memories to find out how to open the panels,
you can get lost much easier.
Lost. Yeah.
But also, just a quick aside, that is why Malta is so open. We've talked about it before, but she has literal skill on her neck.
Yeah.
And that is what makes the connection to the city that much more open.
Do you think she would not have been able to hear the music when she came in the corridor if she did not have the skill on her neck?
I believe that is correct, yes. I believe that she still would have the capacity for skill, but I believe that she would not have heard it so openly, would not have been able to activate the lights so brilliantly without that physical skill on her.
Okay. Yeah. But thank you, Jess, for your ideas. I love the thought that Tintaglia has other victims.
It makes sense. It completely makes sense if Tintaglia has been awake for that long. Why only Rain? You know? So it definitely makes sense that there's other people that she tried to help.
Yeah. Or get
them to help. Yes.
And I wonder too if the men are like somehow more open, because she seems really exasperated with men and not being able to take the chance.
Dragons in general.
True, definitely. Dragons are very heavy on their gender roles, but like opposite to human gender roles. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about. So thank you, Jess. Thank you, Jonas. Thank you, everybody who writes in. We love seeing what you guys have to say, and we can't wait to see what you have next week.